Hello and welcome to the Figge Art Museum's virtual Thursdays at the Figge program series. My name is Melissa Moore and I'm Director of Education at the Figge, and it is very good to connect with you all tonight for this exciting program. In recent months, many of the programs that we have developed have been repackaged. We hope you've enjoyed and that you continue to enjoy the assortment of offerings available through the Figge's virtual museum. As we can, we'll be able to provide modified programs in the museum. But for programs that need to accommodate larger groups of people, like our Thursday evening series, we are excited to host them online until it is safe to conduct them in person at the museum once again. We're adding content to the Virtual Thursdays website every week, so check it often for up-to-date information and registration options. And so you know, next week's program will feature Figge Assistant Curator Vanessa Sage, who will introduce the exhibition Seen and Heard, the Art of Empowerment, currently on display at the Figge and on display online in our virtual museum. That program will start at 6:30 p.m. and just like this week, after registering online, you will receive a link to join the program on the day the program is scheduled. We are able to offer these Thursday programs at no cost to you thanks to the generous sponsorship provided by Chris and Mary Rayburn. Chris and Mary, for that we are so grateful. Thank you. So 2 quick notes about the program tonight before we begin. Since this program is hosted in a webinar format, you can type questions you have at any moment into the Q&A box that you'll find probably in the lower part of your screen, or you can use the chat box and we will address those questions or your comments at the end of the program when we get to that portion of it. Also, I wanted to mention that we are recording the session for archival purposes. So at this time, it's my great pleasure to turn things over to the Figge's Assistant Curator, Vanessa Sage, who will be introducing the program this evening. Vanessa, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. So tonight we're going to be featuring a program about QC Pride. QC Pride features 11 photographs by Andy Abeyta that are powerful portraits of pride in our community. They were taken during the 2019 Pride Fest in downtown Davenport. The images document one of the many events that QC Unity Pride plans and holds during their annual Pride Week. The first Pride parades commemorated the 1969 Stonewall riots, an uprising of Stonewalling patrons and community members who joined in solidarity against pervasive harassment and violence by the New York Police Department. Since then, the movement has grown and evolved, remaining rooted in ideals of cultural equality, self-expression, and the continuing struggle for equal rights and representation. That is up at the museum through August 2nd, but you can also see it online in a virtual format. Tonight's program will focus on Andy Abeyta. He received his BA in journalism from the University of Oregon School of Journalism and Communication. He was previously on staff at the Quad City Times and currently works at the Gazette in Cedar Rapids. As a photojournalist, Abeyta is invested in documenting and sharing the stories of others through his work. So dedicated, in fact, that's why he is unable to join us tonight. He is working the night shift at the Gazette. The presentation will cover Abeyta's career as a photojournalist, his work at the Quad City Times, the Pride Fest, as well as some recent work that he's completed regarding the coronavirus pandemic and Black Lives Matter protests. He is happy to respond to any questions. We'll make sure that he gets those, and then we'll make sure that we get the responses to the questions back to you.
My name is Vanessa Sage. I'm the Assistant Curator from the Figge Art Museum, and joining me today is Andy Abeyta, whose work is featured in QC Pride Photographs, which is currently at the Figge Art Museum through August 2nd. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about Andy's career, as well as the project QC Pride and some recent work. So to get started, I thought we could talk about, or if you could tell me about your background, why you decided to pursue photojournalism.
Hey, thank you, Vanessa. So to start, I'm not even originally from the Midwest. I grew up in a suburb of Portland, Oregon. I started out like in high school. I got into photography, like everyone I think does, or so many people do. High school yearbook and newspaper and all that. And then from there, I kind of I went to the University of Oregon, knew I wanted to go there. And I was too stubborn really to put undeclared as a major because I didn't really know. So I was like, oh, journalism. Yeah. Like I kind of know what that is. And I kind of do that already, sort of. Mostly thinking I would go somewhere else after a year, but I ended up falling in love with it. I had a professor early on that caught my interest. I was already into photography and I'm not a very good writer, so I knew I wanted to go that direction. And then Professor Dan Morrison, who freelanced his whole career, worked for, everyone at some point, worked in like 30 something different countries and I think like 8 different war zones in his career. And I was like, okay, this is cool. I want to do that. And kind of had him take me under his wing. After that, looking for a job in journalism is really tough. So you kind of just apply to anything and anyone you hear back from, you pay attention. And I got an offer to intern fresh out of school. I graduated in 2015. I got an offer to intern for the Cedar Rapids Gazette, which is where I now work. And, I knew nothing about Iowa. So I knew a little bit about the Iowa caucus. I knew that it existed, I'll be honest. I brushed up a little bit and I was like, oh wait, that'd be a really cool thing to photograph. And I would be I started in August of 2015. I obviously ended up accepting, but thought I would stay in Iowa for 6 months and check it out and then head on home. But I don't know, what have I been? I've been here 5 years now. Happily, it was a really good way to start my career. Obviously, it was. I didn't know what I was doing, but it quickly made me kind of get it together and realize. Obviously, I was photographing anything and everything for the newspaper, but that was the big thing that got me started, or that I focused on the most. Like, hey, this is a big deal. I should make sure I know what I'm doing. I would say that's how I started out, and have moved since there.
Like, how did you approach that first project? Were you assigned it? Was it something that you were interested in? And then you went forward from there? And then how does it work once you get into a situation to photograph it?
Well, of course, being in Iowa, I think anyone watching this kind of is going to have a background info on how, for months ahead of the actual caucus, we have candidates coming through all the time. So the way most, all photo staffs at newspapers that I know of anyway, work is you work a certain shift. In the case of Gazette, we rotate shifts. Someone works mornings we do 6 weeks here, 6 weeks there. So really, if an event comes up and it happens during the hours of your shift and you're available, you're sent. So it's not, we don't have a politics photographer and a sports photographer. You have to be able to do everything, which is, I think, the most fun part of the job. But I think we were a staff of, 5 at the time, photographers. So we'd rotate through all sorts of things. And I think it was really good for me because I don't have a strong background or an interest. I didn't grow up interested in politics, so I approached it pretty neutral. Every journalist tries to be as neutral as possible in that situation, especially. And we're humans, of course, but you try your best. And for me, it was, politics were kind of foreign to me as far as like being there, watching it happen on the ground. So I just took to seeing what's interesting. It didn't matter to me who the candidate speaking was. I quickly came to kind of develop a habit of walking in, photograph the candidate for, get a really good photo of them, because obviously you have to have them at the podium, but it's a talking head at a podium. They all look the same after a little while. So you look around the room and you see, like, are people, dressed in their, Sunday best, so to speak? Are they, everyone screaming their heads off, waving, like those signs with like the person's face, or, what's interesting in the room. And so I approach from that angle, and I think most photojournalists do. But I think that's like what got me going, really, to view it that way, and not because if you photographed every candidate and you were just like, oh, I'm going to photograph everyone at a podium and that's all I need to do, like you'd get real bored real quick, I think.
Are there any other memorable projects that you wanted to talk about that I know you have several featured on your website. Are there any that are particularly significant to you that you covered?
A lot of my early stuff was really like short term, like sometimes just a 1-day shoot where I would spend 3 hours with someone and see how much you could try to get to know someone and understand someone in a day, which is its own challenge. That's not the ideal way to do it, but that's often what you have to do. So I have a lot of that. I didn't dive into bigger projects, I think, until so after I left the internship at the Gazette, I interned at the Peoria Journal-Star for about 6 months, and then interviewed and got the job at the Quad City Times. That's when I I was there for a little over 3 years. That's when I kind of settled into a community for the first time and got to know people, and started to dive into projects a little bit there. One that I did relatively recently, 2 years ago now, I guess. It feels recent, but I photographed Davenport's fire department. I just had an interest. I thought I would find a story. I ended up just doing a day in the life of the firefighter kind of thing because I didn't find a deep, interesting story, but I really valued that because I spoke to the fire chief, I spoke to multiple people at the fire department and said, hey, I just want to do a lot of ride-alongs this summer. And I think I ended up doing at least 10 with one shift, got to know that crew at one shift at Central Fire Station, and then just kind of not unannounced, but I would drop in and just, hey, I'm going to be here for the next 4 hours. So whatever happens, I'm here. And that's a really cool way to get to know a group of people, a job, a good way to get to know a part of the city that I didn't know. So that kind of work has a lot of value to me. It's not the, make you famous kind of work, and that's not my goal, but it's the really get to know your community. And I learned a lot. I had a period right after I was like, maybe I should be a firefighter. That looks cool. So it had a pretty good effect on me, at least.
Okay, so that brings me to QC Pride, the exhibition at the Figge Art Museum through August 2nd. And those photos were taken during 2019 Pride Fest, which is, it seems a lot longer ago with everything that's going on right now. But I wanted to know how that project in particular came to be. Was it something that you were interested in, that you wanted to cover? And was it an assignment given to you? Was it a combination? And why were you invested in documenting that event?
Yeah, there's a couple different things at work there. So it's a good question. It's a funny thing when you are at a newspaper, or when you're a journalist in the same community for 3 years. This was my third year in this case. It means that if you work the weekend shifts, you've photographed QC Pride possibly all 3 years, and you're like, okay, how do I make it different this year? How do I, the first year is exciting because it's different. You haven't seen it, at least in this community. The second year, you're like, okay, I did it last year, do it different this year. And then the third year, you're like, oh, am I out of ideas? And you don't want to be stale and boring. So that's exactly, that's exactly how it came to me. I was like, okay, I've done this before. I don't think it was largely impactful before. I didn't do a bad job, but I can do more. So I kind of cooked up a plan with some coworkers who are better at portraits than I am. Meg McLaughlin and Jessica Gallagher are both still working for the Quad City Times and Dispatch Argus. And I was like, I want to do a portrait series, guys, help me. and they helped me kind of get an idea and figure out what I wanted to do. So my idea was I just want to photograph the faces of people attending, whether they're from the Quad Cities, whether they traveled here, whether they're part of the LGBTQ community, whether they're attending for fun, and anything, just whoever's there. So I had that idea, had Jessica Gallagher, my coworker at the time and friend, help me. And then we got there and it was a giant rainstorm for anyone that was there. I mean, it was dumping rain. I don't remember if there's a thunderstorm or if it was just a rainstorm, but it was pretty dramatic in my memory. But basically all my plans changed. We had this outdoor mobile studio set up, ready to go, and you can't do that in the rain. So that completely changed. I had no idea what I wanted to do, and Jess convinced me to just, hey, one camera, one lens, go walk around and just don't worry about the studio lights, don't worry about anything fancy. And I was like, it's gonna look so lame, like I don't want to do that. And she kind of gave me the proverbial shove, like, go do it. And that's where the work came from. It was not my plan A. It was not what I wanted it to look like, but I genuinely think it's better than what I would have come out with. It's more natural feeling, and it's more, I think, just a little bit more telling of who was there in the community and what the event's really about. So it was a little cliche to say, but a happy accident for sure. It was an assignment given to me, but it was something I knew. I mean, I knew I worked weekends. I knew that event was coming up. I knew it was coming. So I'm like, okay, I'm able to make a plan of what I want. And that plan completely fell through. But that's kind of how you approach things, is you know what's coming and you try to do it different. And then sometimes you don't know what's coming until an hour before it comes across your desk. But in that case, I was able to have a plan and kind of know what I wanted and basically just know I wanted something more other than finding feature photos at the event, which is nothing wrong with that, but I've done it a couple times. So yeah, that's where the idea came from and how it came to be.
Yeah, and the results are very dramatic with the kind of stormy sky and then the really bright punches of color and then the close-ups of the individuals.
The storm and just the nature of vivid colors and rainbow banners really, really helped me out.
So in the exhibition text, we talk a lot about the power of images to stir social change and connect people with the humanity of others. And I was wondering if you could talk about that in terms of what's going on now with the coronavirus as well as Black Lives Matter protests. It seems like right now more than ever we're depending on images in order to connect to the outside world, since we're being kept indoors a lot of the time and kept apart socially from other people. And what you feel your role is during this time, and some examples maybe of things that you've recently documented that you feel are effectively communicating the times we're living in.
Yeah. The first thing, whenever I talk about the impact of journalism and photojournalism, I like to always clarify, we're not catalysts or activists of social justice directly. I think I don't want to speak for all journalists, but I think we all try to just document what's happening and make it seen, make sure that people are aware of what's going on. And the change comes from someone else. The community speaks up or doesn't, and decides what needs to happen. And that's I think where our role is so valuable. I don't think we as journalists need to tell people what to feel, what to think. Just, hey, this is what's going on. This is what we see, and that was a tricky way to. That is a tricky way to approach anything, but especially when the coronavirus started happening, or became clear that it was a big thing that was here. It's tough to photograph an invisible thing. It's tough to photograph an invisible thing when you shouldn't be near people. So it's been a lot of learning for all of us, how to photograph the absence of something, how to photograph distance, how to, and to do so safely. I mean, usually one of the best ways to make a photo is to get in close with someone, and perhaps like closer than you're usually comfortable being, or to kind of be not intentionally, but to be awkward and be aware of it and be like, oh yeah, I'm coming over to your house to photograph you doing what you do when no one's home, basically. Like, if you're photographing someone that works from home, or I don't know, a story that revolves around their home life, that's something we do often. We can't responsibly do that right now. A lot of photojournalists I know their companies or their newspapers aren't having them go in people's homes. So it makes everything really tricky. And that's what we're doing. It makes everything really tricky. We've learned a lot on how to stay safe as far as PPE from each other. For me, I have a few friends that are photojournalists, or people I know at least in New York City, that was hit so bad early on, and I was learning from them. I was literally Instagram messaging a friend like, hey, every day you get home, what do you do with your cameras? Or, like Lysol wipes, or dropping everything at the front door, like decontaminating yourself. And that's where we did a lot of our learning, was from other people. Like, well, I don't know if this works, but this is what I do. And then, as far as the actual content, just trying to photograph what's different. The first, like when everything started happening in Iowa and things started closing down, I was at the Iowa high school state basketball tournament, boys state basketball tournament. And, day one was a normal relatively full arena of hundreds of people cheering for basketball teams. The last day was, I think they were allowed, each school I think was allowed 100 people. I don't remember exactly. So you have like a mostly empty arena when it's usually packed and people are screaming, and you're like, oh, this is different. Like, obviously, so you look for, those little things, like a wide shot of the arena being mostly empty. That's now the photo, not as much the action of the sport, for example. So that's been something we've had to explore. And then as far as protests happening amid this, anytime there's protesting, every Iowa town, city I've lived in, protests aren't big unless it's really a big deal. There's not, there's the usual crowd of protesters every weekend on the corner. Like, no, if people are really coming out, it's something that means a lot to the community. And that was true certainly in the Quad Cities, and that's true, seems to be true here in Cedar Rapids. So to see the size of crowds that we've had coming out, especially amid a pandemic, for these protests, this is worth covering and this is worth documenting, and I'm going to do so safely. I'm going to stay as far as I can from people while still being close to the crowd and photographing. Yes, we're going to march for a long time in the heat, and I'm going to have to wear my mask the whole time, and it sucks, but that's the reality of what we're doing. It's just a matter of looking for what's the most telling moment and just being there. It really, really is just as simple as being there and paying attention. For that kind of thing, you're just reacting. I don't go into a protest with a plan of what I'm going to show people, or I don't know. You can't plan. You just have to react to that.
So how you're coping with everything as in a position that you have to go out into the field in order to do your job and in order to do what you feel is a responsibility.
Yeah. It's, I mean, I'm not going to lie. It was at first, and it still is at times, scary to not know what you're up against, really. I've been in situations where I was photographing violence and I knew I was near violence and danger, and I knew the risk. I saw where it was. If I get closer, I'm more at risk, that kind of thing. But this, you don't really know. You're kind of guessing based on what you know from the CDC or whoever else, your state, local public health. So that's been definitely a struggle. And at first it was scary, like, oh, I might get this. And now it's more scary. I could, between, if I haven't been tested recently, I'm thinking I could have this and I could be passing it to someone, or that person this morning could have given me something and I don't know how quickly I would be contagious and be passing it to someone. So testing is vital for my job. I'm trying to be tested a responsible amount. I don't want to be there every day and like, hey, give me another test, because I know they're a limited resource, but I want to be tested and be aware. And I also just want to assume I might be, there's a chance that I'm contagious wherever I am. So I'm keeping that distance from people. I owe it to whoever else I'm going to photograph today, tomorrow, next week, to do as much as I can to, be the most, in this way too, the most neutral, the most hopefully safe person.
Are there any images that you wanted to share and talk a little bit through?
Yeah. So this is just like a general folder of some of my favorite stuff so far. This is what I was talking about, day one. I don't know if this is technically day one, but day one for me of photographing, like, oh, things look different. This is the empty Wells Fargo Arena during the boys state basketball tournament. This is a team coming out, looking around at how empty it is, and definitely something strange. So that's the start of it for me. Here's a series of photos, how early on the Gazette did a story on homelessness and how local shelters were getting along. And this couple, actually, Tim and Denise, were separated. They were staying together at a shelter, and then they were separated because the shelter became a men's shelter, and Denise had to go to a women's shelter. They've been married for, I think it was somewhere in the range of 18 years. And I've actually met him before on a different story. So when I walked in and saw him, we had a connection right away and a level of comfort working with each other. So I was able to make photos of his moment. This is school lunches being handed out, or school meals. I believe they were handing out lunch for that day, breakfast for the next day, and then you'd come back tomorrow and get more food. And this kid sees I don't know if this was his teacher or a teacher he knew, and ran up and wanted to give her a hug. And she was like, no, but we can, air hug, and trying to figure out that what's okay to do. And this is just being there at the right time. And luckily it was in focus. This is one of the many parades that you've seen through neighborhoods. This one, I think, was, this was down near Iowa City. I think it might've been in Coralville. But it was a parade of, I think this was teachers going through the neighborhood, waving at their students and kind of saying hi. And these two girls are neighbors and good friends that were playing with measuring tape, measuring out 6 feet, kind of playfully enforcing social distancing between friends and family nearby. And then this was actually just on the way home from a different assignment I was at. I drove by the park and saw a bunch of college-age students in the backs of their cars kind of hanging out. I don't know, I think they're like 20 feet apart from each other. Saw it happening, went over and said like, hey, introduced myself. I want to take a photo of this. what you guys are doing. Here's why I think it's a big, an important photo. Is that okay with you guys? If so, can I get your names? Cool. Everyone, was kind of like laughing and giggling about it because it's weird to have a photographer show up when you're hanging out with your friends. But I ended up making this photo. I was like, hey, just ignore me, pretend I'm not here. And I ended up making this, which I think kind of tells where everything was at that time, at least. This is a local student who at the time didn't know if they were going to have prom or not, had just gotten, her perfect prom dress. I believe picked up from the store, or it came in the mail. No, she must have picked it up from the store. Had picked it out months in advance, and of course, now we know wasn't able to have a prom, but at the time it was still up in the air. And this was a portrait I took on our front patio, and actually not what I intended. Like, she was posing for me and, looking at the camera or looking off in the distance. And then I don't know if I was adjusting camera settings or like a light or something. She just kind of like rested like this between photos, and I just snapped one, and this ended up being the most telling photo. She was posed for a portrait, but this was kind of a real moment between photos, and it worked out the best, I think. This is at the University of Iowa Hospital. I was sent there to just take some general photos. Obviously, a lot of stories are involving hospitals right now. And for the most part, we can't be inside for obvious, reasonable reasons. So I was walking around getting photos of signs, the building, and saw this like system of sky bridges. I'm sure they have a name for it, but was just taking a few photos of people silhouetted walking by, and someone, I don't know, a doctor, nurse, someone, looks like a medical worker of some sort, stopped and waved, I think at me. And I thought that was a pretty telling photo too. This is at a local long-term care facility. These are family members of the nurse. I think she had a different title. I don't think she was a nurse, but of the care worker. They don't get to see her a ton. She's working very long hours. This was a facility that had a number of coronavirus patients at the time and was hit pretty hard. Was, I think at the time at least, the biggest outbreak in the Cedar Rapids area. So it was a pretty emotional moment. This isn't the most exciting photo, but this is, I think, the first time I was in a hospital amid everything. And I've got a N95 mask on. I think I had a mask over, like a surgical mask, like she's wearing over that mask. And then they'd given me a face shield to wear as well. And I'm still, I'm zoomed in with a long lens, but I'm still 15 feet away. She's just taken a swab to do a coronavirus test and is packaging it to be sent off to the lab. This is trying to photograph a new normal. This is a local guy who gives piano lessons and started doing them over, I believe over Zoom or a similar app at least. So he's got a student on an iPad there, and they're playing back and forth, and I can't go inside. So he's cracked the window open on a cold day, kind of suffered through it for me to get a photo. And yeah, just trying to make something interesting of photographing through windows was and is a big struggle of what we're all doing right now. This was just a moment at a testing site, one of the first major ones before Test Iowa was underway. This was in response to a series of outbreaks at care facilities. So I think it was, at this point, it was only employees of long-term care facilities were being tested. This is at that same facility, and people are lined up to be tested, but they're lined up outside 10 feet away from each other or so. And yeah, the National Guard's in, so it's kind of not something you're used to seeing. This is Prairie High School in Cedar Rapids. A a lot of high schools in our area, and I think I've seen in the Quad Cities too, are doing quite a bit to, have been and still are doing quite a bit to kind of try to give back to seniors who have been, I mean, they didn't have all the senior traditions that they usually have. So this was everyone come, if you want, wear your cap and gown, we're going to show senior photos. They had some other stuff going on, but at this point, everyone's parked in the lot, and the scoreboard from the football field is showing senior pictures and playing music. A testing site in Cedar Rapids, and trying to photograph this without showing someone's license plate, without showing the face of someone being tested. So I have this usually kind of ugly photo of a sign in the middle of my photo, but it's kind of what we're trying to do to share the story without, breaking a degree of privacy that we think is worth respecting. At that same testing site, before it was clear whether or not minor league baseball teams would have a season, the Cedar Rapids Colonels held an event inviting fans out to, they had concessions open, tables spaced out, and they played an old game from, I think this was a game from like 10 years ago or something, on the video board. And more people showed up than this. These were just the three people in front of me in the stands. So I guess the next thing I wanted to share is a little bit more related to the exhibit. I recently actually just happened to meet a drag performer, literally just walking in Iowa City. And we got to talking a little bit, stayed in touch for a little bit, and eventually I ended up photographing what was Studio 13's, which is a gay bar in Iowa City, the only gay bar in Iowa City. Their first performance back. This was no audience, just a live stream event. They since opened back up with limited crowd and then closed again without any, just on the owner's choice, closed again. But this was, this was their first show back, just the performers with a live stream. So I got back, full access to everything. They were super open, luckily. So I got to see them getting ready and everything. And it was pretty, I kind of wish I had like video or audio. It was pretty cool, like camaraderie. Everyone says they're family, but you could tell they were like family to each other, which is really special to be part of that and get to see that. And of course, the performance was awesome. And yeah, then that's just end of the night. So that was just a quick thing. It wasn't an ongoing project, just literally one night, but I wanted to share that I thought it was a little bit relevant to the exhibit. And I don't know, just work from just a month ago or a month and a half ago now. I also have some protest images to share. That's obviously also relevant right now. These are a combination of Iowa City and Cedar Rapids. This was, I can't remember her name right now, but one of the two, her and her sister were the leaders of this event. I don't know if they were, maybe not officially, but they were the main two speakers. And after this event, literally they walked down the street, got in their cars, and they drove to Minneapolis to join protests in Minneapolis, along with a group of, I think, like 15 or so of them went, not just the two sisters. And this is actually the mayor speaking, joining in and everything. They had county board members, the mayor, of course, and different representatives from the government there in attendance. And in attendance and speaking, I should say. And that was actually the first time I'd been around any size of crowd. So that was also like a little bit strange experience for that. This is back in Cedar Rapids now, a event that kind of occupied the park and the street and the, I guess, plaza more, not the park, in front of the courthouse, the county courthouse. And they decided to march through downtown Cedar Rapids, and the police kind of work to keep traffic out of the way. That's what's happening here is, I guess, kind of escorting them through the street, keeping the street closed from traffic. And they did end up marching to the, eventually after marching blocks and blocks through Cedar Rapids, made it to the other side of the city and to the police station. This obviously happened. They kind of occupied the area around the police station and the front steps. To my knowledge, I don't believe any arrests were made, any damage, I know it might look like anarchy or something to some people. This was, as far as I know, a very peaceful event. All of them have been in the area that I'm aware of. Again, in Cedar Rapids, a different event, marching from one park downtown. Just happened to come across some little kids in a lemonade stand. I think they were selling lemonade for like $1 a glass or something. A lot of protesters came over and stopped and got some. Thought that was just a different moment. And then this is as you'll see, I think, in the next photo, people occupied a major intersection, and everyone laid down for the over 8 minutes in memory of George Floyd and his death. So this was a really powerful moment. I haven't personally seen that in a protest, something that was that direct and powerful. I thought I had one more in there. There's also a wide shot there. I mean, there's at least 100 people laying down the street, but I guess I didn't include that one. This is right after that, though, back to marching. The guy holding the megaphone is one of the leaders of the event. Again, I don't know if he's an official. He told me he's not an official leader, but he's clearly some sort of leader because he was leading chants and everything. I've met him a few times now. And then these were a gentleman who was marching just behind him, his 2 kids that were getting in on it, and we're very excited to get to chant a little bit, lead the chant for a moment. And that's that. It's been obviously a busy and kind of crazy time right now to do this job, but also on the other hand, it's been a great time to be able to share people's stories. I wish things were perfect and we didn't have to tell any of these kind of stories, but with this going on, I'm glad that myself and a lot of other photojournalists are able to keep working and sharing what's going on in the community. I think it's really important.
I wanted to ask you just one last question. I know this is things are a little hairy right now, but are there any long-term projects? Are there any things for the future that you have thought about doing?
I've just wrapped up a project and a long-term project and a smaller project. So I'm kind of in between right now. I just finished a project on a local church, St. Jude, and I happened to meet the pastor, and I kind of told their story. They'd already closed down and weren't holding mass. Kind of told their story of like him trying to kind of figure out how to do a live stream, which wasn't something his church had done, through, I think I followed him along for 2.5 months, and through the first mass that they could have people attending, spread out in the church and everything. So I kind of did that project. Coming off of that and looking for something else, I'm looking at a couple ideas. I think a lot of storytelling might not represent all sides of the conversation happening around Black Lives Matter. I think there's more work to be done there. I think personally, I haven't done enough storytelling, telling from a perspective beyond, what I'm familiar with and what I know. So I'm looking for a way to do that. I'm looking for, who can I contact? Who can I get in touch with? I know a few people I have in mind, and approach it without being like, hey, I need you to be my tour guide and show me around what it's like to be Black in our area. But but also I need that. Like that's not someone's job to do that for me, but that's, I think, something that I need to find a way to tell that story. So I have a couple ideas, but nothing's taken off there yet. Hopefully, if we fast forward in a month or two, I'll be able to be like, yeah, this great thing happened. But I'm looking for that right now. I think that's a place that I should be focusing, and I think quite a few journalists are focusing right now.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to do this, and I encourage everyone to come to the museum or visit the virtual exhibition of QC Pride so they can see your work from that event, and then we'll look forward to following what you do in the future. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, Vanessa, thank you so much for sharing this wonderful interview with us this evening. It was so good to hear from Andy, not only about the exhibition and photographs that are currently on display in the museum and online, but also about his current projects. So much has happened between the moment when you conceived of the exhibition with him and then when it went up, a bit delayed because of the pandemic, of course, and then even between the time that it went up and today. So it's great to hear from him, and I'm pleased to pass on our thanks to Andy the next time you speak with him. I know many of our audience members have already been to the museum and explored QC Pride, but for those who have yet to experience it, please do check out our website. We have some updated information on museum hours, the different visitor sessions, and recommended advanced registration, as well as our current policies and procedures for visiting the museum to make sure that everybody has a great experience and stays nice and safe. So I don't see any questions in the chat or the Q&A right now, but you all have received this link from me, so you're welcome to email me any questions you might have for Andy or even for Vanessa. I know that both of them would be happy to answer those, and we can correspond through email from here on out. Of course, if you do want to add anything here, we'll be on for a couple more minutes. I did want to just thank you again, Vanessa, and also I wanted to thank all of you for joining us. We hope you're able to join the two of us again next week. As I mentioned, Vanessa will be back. She'll be presenting a live conversation about the exhibition Seen and Heard that she has curated, currently on display on level 2. So we hope that you're able to join us for that. Check out the website for more details. And yeah, just thanks again. We hope you have a wonderful evening. Thank you. Goodbye.